Hello, everyone. Welcome to Metcalf Institute's 25th Annual Public Lecture Series. I am Sunshine Menezes, Metcalf Institute's Executive Director, and we are joining you today from the ancestral and current homelands of the Narragansett and Eastern Niantic Nations. Their lands and waters originally encompassed what is now Rhode Island, Eastern Connecticut, and Southern Massachusetts, and we pay our respects to all of their elders, past and present. The University of Rhode Island's Metcalf Institute has been advancing informed and inclusive public conversations about science and the environment since 1998. We achieve this through science training for professional journalists, communications training for scientists and engineers, and public events like this one. We also founded the Inclusive SciComm Symposium, which brings together researchers and practitioners from around the world to make all types of science communication more inclusive and equitable. This year's lecture series has explored the challenges that inland and coastal flooding have created for the physical and social infrastructures that sustain communities. Climate change is causing more frequent and intense precipitation and flooding events around the world. So this week, we've talked about disproportionate flooding risks among low-wealth communities and communities of color. We've learned about the need for equitable planning for flood-resilient infrastructure. And we've heard about innovations in flood policy and planning. Throughout this series, we've returned to the idea of community action, since community members are best suited to know the scale and specifics of their local challenges, and are also leaders in identifying and implementing solutions to the increasing challenge of intense flooding. We want to thank you all for being here today and throughout this week to explore these critical topics. I also want to note that thanks to our generous advisory board, Metcalf Institute has a dollar-for-dollar matching opportunity going on this month until June 30th for all donations up to $11,000. Your gift supports public programs like this one, as well as training opportunities, all in the interest of advancing conversations that increase awareness and action on the urgent challenges posed by the climate crisis. If you would like your gift automatically doubled, please click on the link that is now in the chat. And now to today's panel. Today, we are lucky enough to hear from a panel of experts who are passionate about collectively developing solutions to the flooding problems driven by sea level rise. They will help us think about community action with a very specific case study in Miami, Florida. First, we'll hear from Dr. Catherine Mock, Associate Professor of Environmental Science and Policy at the University of Miami. Dr. Mock's research assesses risks and options for equitable and accessible responses to threats from climate change, specifically increased flooding, extreme heat, and wildfire. She's previously been a researcher at Stanford University and has co-directed the scientific activities for one of the working groups of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the IPCC's 5th assessment report. Dr. Mock recently won the Piers Sellers Prize for world-leading contributions to solution-focused climate research. Our next panelist, Xavier Cortada, is an artist who also works at the University of Miami as an artist in residence and professor of practice in the Department of Art and Art History. Mr. Cortada's art focuses on the intersection of art, policy, and law to bring light to environmental concerns and engage with Florida communities. He has had environmental art installations at the North and South Poles, Taiwan, South Africa, and Bolivia, just to name a few. Last year, Mr. Cortada was awarded a 2021 National Wetlands Award from the Environmental Law Institute for his work engaging with community members of Miami-Dade County in conserving and restoring local mangrove forests. And our third and final panelist is Gabriel Ferrer, a very recent graduate of Miami Senior High School and soon to be freshman at Harvard University. Congratulations, Gabriel. Mr. Ferrer was the class valedictorian and has a passion for the intersection of business, science, and the environment. His work as a leader in his student community, organizing events for more than 400 students during high school, recently earned him a nomination for the Silver Knight Award for outstanding students at Miami Senior High School. It is my great pleasure to welcome Xavier Cortada, Gabriel Ferrer, and Dr. Catherine Mock. We'll start by hearing from Dr. Mock.
Great. Thank you so much, Sunshine, for that very warm welcome. And it really is a pleasure to be on this panel with Xavier and Gabrielle. I will start with a few slides. We'll spend most of this hour thinking hard about what the challenges of sea level rise and intensifying coastal flooding look like on the ground and how communities are building responses. But I'll start with a little bit of an overview of how we got to where we are right now and what that implies for the future. So Miami in some ways is exceptional, but it is not unique. In most places, when it comes to how people have chosen to develop through time, there has been a very deliberate development on the water. It's not just because the water is beautiful. Oftentimes it's tied to the economic opportunities that coastlines and river systems entail. So here in Miami, over the last century, there has been an immense development on the water's edge throughout the county, also on the other side of the county near the Everglades. And no matter where we look, when we think about how we deal with sea level rise into the future, it is absolutely crucial to recognize that these patterns of our settlement through time are totally consequential for where we are right now. This is a map looking down on Miami-Dade County, and it's showing one extreme scenario of sea level rise in terms of looking at the combined effects of heavy rainfall, storm surge, and groundwater. And the key thing that I want to emphasize here is that most of this county is highly exposed to flooding from these different drivers coming together, really meaning that this is a challenge for everyone together. But the capacities are quite different. In work also completed by a PhD student, Nadia Sidram, for her dissertation at FIU. What she did was look at some of the factors that make flooding particularly consequential. For example, do you have a car? Do you have enough finance to evacuate if a hurricane is coming? What is the nature of the impact for you? And this is, again, looking down on the county with each of these little shapes showing a census tract. And what we see is that on the left, there are high income regions moving to lower income regions of the county. And whether it is the impacts of flooding directly or the impacts of intensifying sea level rise on the geography of risk and real estate markets in the region, everyone is affected, but in different ways. So if we think about a generic settlement by the sea, it could be Miami, it could be all of the other areas of the global coastline. And we add it up, we really see that the experiences of Miami reverberate broadly. In this century, between 88 million and 1.4 billion people could be displaced by sea level rise that may occur over the next 80 years. In terms of what we do about it, the usual assumption is build a wall, keep the water out. There are real limits to this strategy in South Florida because we have a porous bedrock, but we can get to that in greater detail later. But the key thing about building a wall to keep water out is that it is phenomenally expensive. And really only for about 13% of the global coastline would the economics add up, meaning that a wall could have a hope of being something that could be financed as the major strategy in responding to climate change. Failing a wall, where people normally go next, is retreat, moving away from the coastline. For economic modeling of responses to sea level rise, the implication is that for about 65% of the global coastline, retreat, more like an unmanaged chaotic retreat, could be the economically viable option. But really the future is somewhere in between. With a large portfolio of responses, you could say that water management in South Florida right now is more like this generic schematic, a lot of engineering, a lot of movement of water, a lot of pumping, elevation, walls, all coming in combination. The future could be different though. It could be a world where we make a lot more room for water, elevating structures, letting water come into the environment on the high tide, as well as during the storms. Or there could be a future where we bravely push out into the water. And in case this looks like science fiction, I will mention that not only has reclamation of wetlands been the major way that societies have developed in the past centuries, to that point of why we're in the problem we're in, but also you too could rent this home, and we're starting to see some rather wild circumstances in terms of rising waters coming in, along with other complicating stressors. So moving into the future, key thing I'd like to emphasize here in closing is that there are different categories of responses: resisting, keeping water out, making room for water, accommodating it, avoiding development in the first place, or retreating where the floods become too repetitive through time. And that as we think about evolution from the present day in the bottom left to any of these possible futures, key themes are that number one, change is inevitable due to the changing climate, as well as all of our other patterns of development. And that almost any future that would be desired is going to involve many different tools coming together, but driven by goals that go far beyond climate narrowly defined. So thank you. And I think we will now transition to the next speaker.
So it's my pleasure to be with dear colleagues here today and to talk a little bit about the work that I do in community. I use arts elasticity to work across disciplines to engage communities in problem solving. I have done that through time in a bunch of different ways, whether it is working with theoretical physicists at the Large Hadron Collider as they discovered the God particle, or working with 400 museum volunteers to try to sequence a piece of DNA randomly, or working with hydrologists at Hubbard Brook, the place where acid rain was discovered 6 decades ago, as a way of helping understand the water cycle. I try to use art as a way of helping us reframe and better understand our relationship to one another and the natural world. And as of late, I have been trying to help us understand what to do with all the melting ice. I tried putting it back in a freezer, but found out that that didn't work because, of course, putting sea ice in a freezer only generates more greenhouse gases. So I had to come up with other solutions. And that's why I created the project that I want to tell you a little bit about today in this presentation. This is Miami. Well, future Miami. It's part of Antarctica, part of the dry valleys. And I worked with scientists in Antarctica when I was there with the National Science Foundation back in 2006 and 2007 to address the issue of global climate change. And they gave me pieces of Antarctica that I incorporated into things I called Antarctic ice paintings, using the sediments and glacial material that were made in Antarctica with Antarctica to try to explain Antarctica. But more than Antarctica, I was trying to explain where Antarctica was coming. I have a map here that shows Miami, and in it, I try to show that Miami doesn't just have the coastline that we all can see, which of course is the Atlantic Ocean, but there's another coastline, the western coastline, the second coastline of Miami, which is the River of Grass, the Florida Everglades. Not only is it the source of all our drinking water, but at a elevation similar to what's on the eastern side of that big ridge you see that hasn't been inundated, it is vulnerable to sea level rise. And as Professor Mack's presentation just showed, there is extreme vulnerability on both sides. There's also a third coastline, of course, and that is the water beneath our feet. And that is the water that impacts how we live and what we do as a community way before the waves start lapping at our doorsteps. So at the beginning, I just wanted individuals to understand it. So I created these ice paintings as precursors of the horrors to come. It was my way of saying the very water that I used to create these art pieces is the water that threatens to drown our city. And that was back in 2006 and 2007 when I was in Antarctica. Well, back in 2018, I decided to use those art pieces as images for the backdrop of these markers that I created, markers that I would place across our community in front of people's homes. And I did so as a way of mapping the topography, of having people better understand how high their home was above sea level as a way of having them understand their vulnerability to the rising seas. So what I did is I engaged community members at a homeowners association meeting where, using an app, they typed in their addresses and were able to find out how many feet above sea level their homes were. But more importantly, they took these markers and they placed them in their front homes. It wasn't a political sign, it wasn't a for sale sign. It was a sign basically telling their neighbors that they were on the same boat, that they were at the same elevation, that they shared the common ground, regardless of ideology, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of activism. They all shared the same vulnerability. And I wanted to make that argument because here in Miami, we're in the middle, we just started hurricane season. When there's a hurricane on the horizon, everyone moves, everyone acts, and they can map it 3-4 days away. But over here, we are mapping something that's impacting us today and will impact us more in 3 and 4 decades from now. But unlike hurricanes, the water will not recede. Unlike hurricanes, FEMA may not be there to help us because, of course, it's not just Miami getting impacted, but it's every place where land touches water. So I wanted to engage our community and use art as a way of making sea level rise a problem impossible to ignore. So we did it. We literally mapped and marked the intersections at their elevation. So as people drove by, they would know what their community looked like. And this was particularly important for the western portions of our community that thought that because they were farther away from the beaches, farther away from the bay and the coast, that they would be better protected. But of course, we have a ridge, and on opposite sides of that ridge, your elevation starts getting closer and closer to sea level until it reaches either the Gulf or the bay. And we just wanted individuals to be aware of that and then do something about it by inviting them into conversations, inviting them into meetings where they could work together and learn together to begin to problem solve. Again, to find solutions just like the ones Dr. Mao was just alluding to and or talking about it in the end of her presentation. Recently, in partnership with Dr. Malik and 2 other of my co-principal investigators at the University of Miami in a project called On the Move that addresses climate migration in Florida, we decided to go back to my alma mater, the very high school where I graduated 40 years ago, and bring this underwater visualization project to the community. So our team literally went to every single science classroom at the high school and gave presentations, 90-minute presentations about climate, about the human's impact on climate, and about the vulnerability to rising seas in our community. But importantly, had the students create markers where they discovered their own properties elevation. They hand painted it on the markers and they put it all across their community as a way of having their parents, their grandparents, and their neighbors understand it. So there were 2,500 of these students that learned from us. And again, each of them put signs in their front home. That led to a community town hall meeting where panelists, including Professor Mock, spoke to the community, just like we're speaking to you today, about the impact of climate, about policies that could be enacted, and how individuals could be motivated to effectuate that change, again, in enacting the policies. And at the end of the town hall, invited the students and parents assembled to go out into the foyer and talk to about a dozen environmental groups that they could volunteer with, so that the curiosity that had been piqued had a place in which to take action, so that they could volunteer and participate in organizations. The component clearly at its focus had the students and the student involvement, the way that students were themselves not just learning about a program, not just finding creative solutions to a problem, but they themselves being the agents, the protagonists, the eco-emissaries who took that campaign and took that conversation to their community. And if you can just wait a couple more minutes, or actually a couple more seconds, you'll hear firsthand from one of the students who led us in that effort across their neighborhood, Miami's famed Little Havana community. So obviously we'll have the opportunity to have more conversations as soon as the three panelists are done talking and do a little Q&A. But that is the way that I, as an artist, work across disciplines to engage communities in problem solving. And with that, we'll bring it to, and I'm so proud of him, the valedictorian of Miami Senior High School, who will now do the third component of our presentation. Gabrielle?
Yeah, give me a sec, because I cannot start my...
Of course, yeah. So again, Gabriel is, well, he'll tell you about it. Miami High is Miami's first high school. Gabriel, just interrupt me as soon as you're ready. Miami High, are you ready? Miami
No,
High
actually, I don't know what's happening.
I'm sorry?
Give me a sec. Give me a sec.
Go ahead, I'll talk, just interrupt me when you're ready.
Yeah.
So Miami High is the city of Miami's first high school. Miami, the city of Miami was incorporated in 1896, and soon thereafter, the school was built. When they built Miami and Miami High, I don't think the settlers understood that Miami would be impacted by sea level rise. Like Dr. Mock said, they built at the water's edge, just as the Spanish colonizers had done when they displaced the Tequesta, who lived along the Miami River. And on that same ground, the different structures were built through time, including fortresses during the Seminole Indian Wars and during the Civil War, and then the matriarch of Miami who came to the river. However, when I went to school 40 years ago, we knew the consequences of human impacts on the climate. And in those 40 years, I'm embarrassed to say that we as a society haven't done enough. In fact, I think we've done less and less, in all candor, with the knowledge that we have, to address the problem of rising seas. The home I went to when I went to Miami High, and Gabriel, I'm just waiting for you, I'm just holding the fort here for you, but the home I went to, Miami High, flooded a little bit during Hurricane Irma. It's close to the Miami River. The home today is worth a whole lot more than it was worth when I was in Miami High 40 years ago. I'm not sure how much that home will be worth 40 years from now when the class of 2022, when Gabriel, the Harvard grad, goes, oh, you ready? Comes back. I think I am. 2062 to give a speech like the one he's about to give now. And that's why we want to raise that awareness. And that's why I'm so proud of leaders like Gabriel who did what he did. Gabriel?
Thank you. It's such an honor being introduced by you. And well, hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Ferrer. I'm a very recent Miami Senior High School graduate. And today I'm going to talk to you about the project that, along with the Xavier Cortara Foundation and his team, that we were able to put forward. It was a community service project that was aiming on conscientizing the people from my community, my home, about what would happen if we do not do something about the climate change. So as I said, I'm a Miami High School senior graduate, and while I was a student there, I had the privilege of becoming the first vice president of the biggest service club in the school, right? And through this, I had the task of actually getting to bring community service opportunities to my students, right? So a few months back, when I saw Xavier Cortaras's, like, the things that they were doing in the school, I got really curious about it. And I figured that I had an idea on mind, right? Like bringing this project outside of the school. Like, so not only the students who actually be affected, like their parents, but the people who, who live the day to day in the community, in my community, the community that I live in, which is Little Havana. The community is an Hispanic immigrant one, in which not many people are educated about the climate change. So that's why we chose this community, right? Because we could talk to them about, we could connect with these people, because since they were an immigrant, they felt what it was like leaving their home for an issue that they could not control. But the thing with climate change is that if they don't do anything, they're gonna have to leave their home once again. But for that, I wanted to conscientize the people from there, right? So we wanted to do it in a famous street, which is called Calle Ocho, in which there's a lot of small businesses, right? So after talking to Xavier and the president of the club, we got to present this service opportunity to my members. Actually, here's a picture of how I talked to them, right? So I sold them this service as one in which we're gonna do something about climate change. But I didn't give them too much detail, right? Because I wanted them to go with, having a lot of questions about what we're gonna do, right? To start them being curious about what they were gonna do, right? So then I I was lucky enough to get 75 people to sign up for the service, right? So I told them to go, I think it was May 27th or something like that I told them to go to the school, right? So now I have 75 people in front of me asking me, what the hell are we gonna do today, right? So that day, Xavier actually went to the school and he actually got the students excited about what we were gonna do. Because yeah, they came for a service about climate change, but they were not really excited because they thought, because usually people don't think that whatever we're gonna do is actually gonna do something. But Xavier went out and actually he gave them a presentation about how every little thing that we do is gonna affect the greater community, even if it looks as unimportant as just going to talk with other people, right? So he made them believe that we, the students, are part of the solution as well, right? And actually, he told us that yeah, we will find a lot of rejections. When we would go to talk to these people, but some people would just we would just spark a change in one people or one person, two people, 10 people or stuff, right? So now I'm gonna show you a video of how we actually got to present the project. Give me a sec. And while I'm presenting the video, I'm gonna talk to you about some challenges that we had while we had to present this to the community. Can you see my screen?
Right now we see, yep, the video's coming up.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so as you can see here, you're gonna see.
Yeah, you just have a little commercial there. It'll go in a minute.
Yeah, that's an ad.
It's actually good, Gabriel. It's a commercial about the city of Miami, so all the people from outside the city can come and come visit.
No, I'm pretty sure if they get to visit Miami, they're gonna realize how beautiful it is, and they're gonna understand why we want to do so much to take care of it, right? So as you can see here, Xavier is talking to the students about the project, about how we're gonna go out and like to talk to the small business owners about the climate change and stuff. And now you're gonna see the biggest challenge that we had, which is funny because you have 75 underage kids trying to walk all the way from the school to the place where we wanted to go. It was really fun because we had to stop the cars and let the people walk and stuff. And yeah. And you can see like they're having a good time while they're doing services. That's what I wanted to do. We didn't want to make it something like of an assignment in which they have to do homework or something. We just wanted to make it fun so that they get excited about it too, right? So you're gonna see the first business that we went to. Yeah. So this is the first business that we went to. We will take turns in group of 3 to go out and talk to the business owner about how we came from Miami High, and we just wanted them to paste the poster in front of their sign so people get so that people will get curious about it and they will ask them, right? And yeah, we found, as Xavier told us, we found a lot of rejections because people they usually don't care about it. but we got some people to actually get interested about it. And you know what? There's another business that's going to show that I want to talk to you about. This one. This one was an example of an answer that we got a lot, right? Because we will go and talk to the business owner, and the business owner, he will be like, oh yeah, I am an old man. I'm not gonna see the harms of this, like the climate change. But we would then go and talk to the business owner, and we would tell them like, okay, you're not gonna feel it, but I'm pretty sure that your son, your daughter, your granddaughter will love to live the same Miami that we have the privilege of living of, right? So most of them got, you know, got interested about it, but some others still, after telling them that, they really did not care. But it's not that one, it's not the people who didn't like who didn't change that matters, but it's that one people or 5 people or 10 people who actually got interested about it and felt that like they had a chance of doing something about it. And yes, you can see we will go and the people will be walking down the street and they would be like, what the hell are you guys doing? And we would just tell them and make them excited about it too. But yeah, it was such a really fun experience. And yeah, as you can see, we will put them everywhere. And hopefully we get to do this next year, because I saw the students were really excited about it and they wanted to do it again. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for hearing me.
Gabriel, thank you for sharing that. And similarly, Xavier and Catherine, thank you so much for your remarks. So I think, why don't you all turn your cameras on now? And I want to invite everyone who is tuning in to submit your questions via the Q&A function. But to get us started, I'd love to hear from all of you first about what you have learned from working together in this way across generations, across disciplines. What have you taken away from this?
Who wants to go first? Xavier, you want to kick off?
Okay, sure. Look, I think arriving at my old alma mater, when I went to Miami, I'm a son of Cuban refugees. When I went to Miami, Miami High was called Havana High because all of us were, from Cuban families. Gabriel didn't tell his story too much, but he is the son of Venezuelan political refugees who came to Miami very recently, and Gabriel didn't speak a word of English. Through time, and now he's literally the valedictorian going straight to Harvard, and mobilized an entire group of individuals in his high school. But through time, that school had changed, from Managua High to Tegucigalpa High, because it's sort of like this conveyor belt into the greater Miami community, which, is, I think all of you should know, is a majority minority community. And what I learned when I got to Miami High is that the same, curiosity and sense and resolve of trying to do better for the community existed in an individual from another country, from another time, from another age group, who wanted to do more. And like me, when I had my mentors come to Miami High and help me be the man I am today, giving a little mentorship and support can help move mountains. And you literally saw that happen in Miami High. At the other end, I am, one of the luckiest, artists in the world to be able to have someone as special as Dr. Mock as a friend and colleague. And I've been doing this work with scientists for many, many years, but to have someone who understands interdisciplinary work, who's at the top of, her field as one of the IPCC authors, like clearly at the very top, understand and validate and support the kind of work I do, I think also puts air beneath my wings, so that to me, as an interdisciplinarian, what I learned from this process at the very high academic level and down to the ground in Little Havana is that we need to find strategies to be able to engage and to work together and to have this mutual respect that the 3 people on this panel have for each other, understanding that the variety of our experiences actually contribute to the conversation. And if we can find methods of respecting and understanding, valuing that, and bring it into the conversation, I think we can move mountains.
Yeah, and yeah, Yeah. And the thing is that I could see from my own eyes that the people believe that it's such a big problem that just doing an art project or doing something they believe that's not going to change. But I want to give props to you, Xavier, because you were able to make everyone actually excited and believe that they were actually part of the solution. And that was really something like that hit with me, that stayed with me. Because yeah, I would talk to the people before and they didn't even know what climate change really was. They just know, oh yeah, it's something that related with water that's gonna happen in a million years. But Xavier, he had the ability to go and tell them that no, this is something that might actually affect you or might actually affect your son or your granddaughter. And he actually got the people excited about it.
Great, and I can really only echo things that have already been said. But first, Sunshine, I think the way you phrase it, like multi-generational collaboration, I see a few aspects of that are just so crucial. I think as Gabriel described, when he went to one of the businesses and someone said, I'm going to be fine. There are a lot of ethics relevant in how we respond in the changing climate. That's relevant in any one snapshot in time. It's easy if you live in an air-conditioned mansion that is elevated off the ground and you can evacuate easily to say, I'm not affected by climate change in Miami. But many people do not have that luxury, even in the current time, much less into a future where there will be much greater threats. And I think the second part of that is that when it comes to communicating about this issue, hearing from Gabriel is a lot more effective than hearing from someone who says, this isn't about me. And I think from the communications perspective, trusted messengers, people for whom the issue matters. You'll hear politicians say like kids on the rope line is the thing to be terrified of. And I think there's just a huge amount there. And then in terms of working with Xavier, as he described, this collaboration that we've been part of has had science, yes, it's had art, it's also had law and policy and economics. And I think a simple way to think about this is that there are real limits to treating climate change as a science issue. Society will get nowhere in responses, and this radical interdisciplinary approach is really necessary. I also think from the art side, there is so much emotion in the climate challenge, and science, well, you can label emotions and then study them, but there's not so much there that's about experiencing those emotions and thinking about desired futures. So I don't know, it's really an amazing collaboration.
That is apparent. Thank you all for responding to that. So building on what Catherine just said, Xavier, you when you first started talking, you said that you like to use art's elasticity as a way to engage people. Can you talk some more about that? What does that mean for you?
Sure. So in working with other disciplines, art serves a couple of roles. I think one really, really powerful role is that it has incredible convening power. In many ways, people may say, I don't even know how to draw a straight line, but as a way of capturing your imagination, your attention, helping tap into your creativity, just think about yourself at any opportunity that you have to see an artist working or a performative piece. You can connect with it. It's an intuitive thing. It's something that we have been doing as a species for tens of thousands of years. I would argue it's the thing that made us human. But in looking at art, not as an object, but as a process, that shopping cart moving up and down Little Havana, that performative aspect of it with all the trappings created around it, has the magnetism to like literally draw attention, also inspiration from within. You're part of something bigger than you. You're creating something. You can actually visualize and see yourself in that regard. And I think when working across other disciplines, what I love is that it creates this interstitial space for scientists and artists to talk and think differently. And I think that becomes the place where new ideas and new interactions can happen, because you're not speaking the same jargon, you're out of your comfort zone, and you're actually prompted to think creatively. And that's why, as a guy who could do this in many different areas, I've chosen to go down the path of art as a way of engaging community, because I think it does serve as a perfect platform to disarm you. You know, you don't feel threatened by it. Taps your creativity and creates a kind of mechanism for community interaction.
I also love the simplicity of the idea of the underwater project. You know, I mean, that it's so powerful, and it's just such a simple message. So, you know, bravo on this idea and achieving it so beautifully. Gabrielle, I have a question for you. I wonder, you talked a little bit about how the business owners responded to you all as you were doing the service learning project. I wonder how your classmates responded to this. How did people feel as they were participating in this, your student peers?
Well, at first, as I told you before, actually starting the thing, they had lots of questions because they, you know, as a kid, you believe that you have no power, like on doing anything because you're not an expert on such thing, right? But then we actually went out to talk to the business owners, and they saw that they just had enough, like they just knew enough to actually make someone else be like care about it. They're really excited actually because they saw how much potential they can have, even if you don't have to be, you don't even have to be to have a PhD on I don't know, to actually get to do something about it. So they're really excited. And actually we got some, you know, some of the volunteers really shy, right? So we actually got to push them, like to seek discomfort, like to get out of the discomfort zone, to actually go and talk to the business owner. And then it was so rewarding when they would get out of the store and they were like, yeah, I did it. Like I was able to talk to the business owner. The business owner did not eat me. I actually got to talk to them, and they're really excited. Actually, I got to see so many happy faces, but really tired faces because we weren't there for like, I think it was 4 to 5 hours, but they really enjoyed it. It was really fun, actually.
That's
And
fantastic.
the question that I got the most when like the service ended was, when are we gonna do this again? Or how we're gonna keep doing, like impacting the people. So that was really, you know, important for me because they actually wanted to do something else. So like they wanted to go the next step.
That is so exciting. And I realize you've just graduated, so maybe you're like passed the torch to someone else at Miami Senior High. But are there plans, or is it still kind of coming together? Do you know?
Yeah, actually, I'm not, since I'm not a student, I cannot be the first vice president of the club again. But actually, he's in the audience, one of the first vice presidents.
Oh yeah.
Robert Capetillo. Hey, um, him and his friend Michael Albert, they both became the first vice president of the club. Because now the club has gotten so big that we don't need only one, we need two. So we can do even more. So, and he's really passionate about the climate change. Actually, that's why he's here. He chose to be here. And I'm pretty sure they're gonna do way bigger projects than this one.
I'm beaming. I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
That's so fantastic and exciting. Before I have another question for Catherine, but before I go there, a question came in from Martina saying, amazing work. She actually asked the same question about next steps of Gabrielle, but the next question is, what can scientists and science journalists do to help to do more of this? And I suppose really that question is for any of you.
And in particular, what can scientists do to help in societal responses? Yep. I mean, I think there is a tremendous amount we do not know about societal responses in a changing climate. And for me, it's been super exciting to watch how the field has evolved. So for example, when I started thinking about climate change a lot, a little over a decade ago, I guess 2 decades ago in terms of nascent attention to it, but in terms of a full-time employment in 2010, at that point in time, the wisdom was that we couldn't link any given extreme event to the change in climate, to our emissions of heat trapping gases. You step forward to the current day, and now the space of climate services pretty much can say, this heat wave was this much more likely given our emissions of heat trapping gases. This rainfall event was this much more likely given our emissions of heat trapping gases. So I think in terms of science for society, even in the space of straight up climate science, there have been tremendous advances. And there also has been a lot of attention in the space of climate science to the really important uncertainties. Just how stable is the West Antarctic, as Xavier described? That is actually a very big open science question. But then if you flip to the other side of more the social science realm, that's where much of the action is right now. How do people perceive the changing climate around them? When do they take action? When does that add up to policy? Are there breakthrough points where suddenly people start taking the issue a lot more seriously? Just what trajectory of climate change are we on right now? Those are really, really rich areas for science. And they're places where we couldn't have asked those same questions a decade ago because society is so much farther along in the space of responses.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to respond to that?
I think for science journalists, or for just, let's just say journalists in general, I think the pivotal question becomes how seriously is your editor taking the story, and how much investigative journalism resources are put to it to really dig deep and understand how public resources are utilized to planning for what is an inevitability, and to really look at what lip service looks like at a COP26 or at a Washington, D.C. or a Tallahassee, and to really distill that in a way that connects to the homeowner slash voter slash student, so that you give them the information in a way that allows them to use it to take action. And we know that in America, nothing changes unless it's a top 1 or 2 issue. That's the problem we've had with gun control. People can care about the environment, but they're always duped into making it a low priority, not an issue when it comes to voting. But if journalists can help distill the truth of the matter, which is that everything from your economy to your future is dependent on how our elected officials plan for that future, then I think journalists would be a little bit more responsible. And said another way, and I'm totally paraphrasing this, but just imagine if you were a journalist at the Soviet Union who could not speak because you'd get arrested instantly if you were to speak, let's say, against Ukraine. But some still do, right? Some still have the courage to do that. Imagine, and I heard this at the press. I heard this at the big press. Oh my God, was that dinner called where all the press come?
The White House Correspondents' Dinner.
The Correspondents' Dinner, right? the Oscars of the White House. I heard it as I was watching it. Imagine if, right, if you knew that if you had the ability to do that, to investigate, to speak truth to power, to do the kind of job that a dwindling journalism ecosystem isn't meeting. How much change we could make. Because at the end of the day, all of us, every single species on this planet and every single human being on this planet will suffer. And I think that I, as an artist, through my work, try to do that through my art. I literally try to reframe it so you see the impact of that, so you act on it. And I guess that's what I would say. And for scientists, I think that they know their role in communicating these ideas, and I don't have enough time to talk about it, but one of the pieces I talked about was about having scientists understand that their role is outside of refereed journals, that I want our worldview to be informed by science, and that scientists have a role in helping us as a humanity understand our worldview.
That sounds like a great standalone talk, Xavier. So we'll keep that in mind for the future. And by the way, thanks for a great plug for Metcalf Institute's training for journalists and everything you just said a moment ago. That's exactly why we do that sort of training. Gabriel, did you want to add anything to that?
But yeah, I just wanted to um like to reiterate the fact that the thing that Xavier is doing is so important because yeah, the people who know about it are getting worried more and more worried about it, right? But the people who do not know, nothing is changing, right? So that's why it's so important to bring the art side of it because the art either has no language or an age, right? And um, the fact that okay, my parents may not care about it, but the fact that Xavier is going through the son, so the son talks to the parent, and the parent can actually do something about it too. So that's why it's so important to just leave it open for the people who actually have no concern about it, because that's the people who actually is gonna make the thing an issue and not a worry.
Absolutely agree. So we don't have a lot of time left, but there are so many questions, so many directions we could take this conversation. But I would love to give you all a chance to think about where you want this this collaboration and this very participatory mode of not just kind of community awareness building, but community driven action. Where do you want this to go? All of you, we heard a little bit about this from Gabriel and where it might go with the students who are coming behind him at Miami Senior High. But what else do you have in mind? All of you.
You want to start, Xavier?
I could. I mean, I've been speaking for a while. I mean, it's our project.
Go for it.
Okay, so yeah, we're not leaving Miami High behind at all. In fact, we're doubling down on it. So every single high school student received this, but there's a freshman class who hasn't received this. So we will be back at Miami Senior High School. And I'm actually, so happy that the first vice president, that Robert's over here. I think he's on one of the photos. He's in the video, definitely, of the Miami Herald, and I think even the cover photo. So I'm glad he's here taking notes, right? Because we're bringing this back to Miami High in a stronger, better force. And we're also, so Miami High is on the eastern part of the county, right? That's the first school, right? And then we moved outwardly. So now in the fall, we're going to continue with Miami High, but also go to a place called Sweetwater, which is literally built on the Everglades, and it's the westernmost municipalities, to do the same sort of elevation project over there. But importantly, we as colleagues, as university, and actually Catherine could probably take it from here, but we as colleagues will continue working on this research and on the intersectionality of the work we're doing, and also, I think importantly, the work we're doing within our university, which you can talk about the Students Academy and the university and our work, Catherine, if you like, sort of the work we do as a university to help address these issues.
Yeah, great. And as Xavier was describing, as the art as a social practice piece proceeds, we've been layering in science into that. So for example, there are what are called pre-post surveys. So how is the experience going? How are perspectives changing? How is behavior changing? And really, also as Xavier described at the start, the goal is not just to establish that there's a problem, it's to connect with solutions. So we're kind of creating the scientific basis to understand what was the nature of the outcomes of this process, and especially as it is scaled or replicated, ideally in many other regions, those lessons emerging in Miami have much broader relevance. As Xavier described, it's also a very interdisciplinary collaboration, and part of what we're doing as well is understanding how the geography of risk is changing in the region. So it's really easy to say you're only affected if your home is flooded, where you live is flooded, but in fact, a changing flood landscape shifts the real estate markets of the region as a whole. And so what may have been naturally occurring affordable housing under 3+ feet of sea level rise, that is going to shift. And that means that the potential for displacement, we don't have great renter protections in South Florida. There's a ton there. So understanding where might the economic tipping points start to happen, such that this is not just an issue of is there water at your front door, but this is an issue in a whole interconnected ecosystem of real estate and policy and mortgages and finance, super key there. And the last part of what we're doing in collaboration with the lawyer that Xavier mentioned is coming up with the law and policy options. If you take people off the record, they are very frank about concerns of how this would reverberate in a region where grow. Deny tomorrow is a little bit of our style and our approach. But having those law and policy toolkits available when people can proactively plan into the future, it really makes a big difference.
And to that point, Catherine, what I loved about these 75 students is that, and it's awesome, we're trying to get students to be, to have, activism. But a lot of the times the students come to a march someone else planned and, basically where a teacher someone else made, and they're just sort of walking. But over here, what I loved about this is that these were kids who were persuasive. They were literally advocating and talking to store owners and changing their minds. And in my mind, what I was really doing was building 75 future, climate, I was going to call them climate activists. What I was really doing is building 75 engaged citizens. And I remember that every one of my classrooms, I just put a link to our website so you can see a lot of the videos and stuff we did. But more than anything, it's just about creating a community that cares and empathizes and can help deliver a more equitable future for those most impacted. And schools like Sweetwater and Miami High have populations that will suffer first and suffer most. And that is why we, as researchers and as artists and as people who care, want to make sure that we create programs and methodologies that can be replicated, because this problem is only going to impact us more and more, and we need solutions for it.
Absolutely. So, Gabrielle, I'm going to give you the last word. We're all so happy for you that you are graduated and moving on to Harvard. And I wonder, so we talked about the impacts that this experience had on your classmates, but for you now, how do you carry this experience forward as you go on to this next chapter of your life? What does this mean for you kind of more generally?
My objective too would be to conscientize the people who are not going to be as affected by it, because one of the changes that we want to make is in the policy. So even if you don't live in Miami, you have a vote, you have a way of like putting your voice out there. So my goal would be to go out there to some of the cities who are not being as affected as Miami, and actually get to tell people about it and make them some kind of fall in love with my city. So they're like, okay, I guess I'm gonna vote to do something about it. Even if it's not their home, I want them to feel like they have the need to make a change. So it's really good that we're going for the people who's gonna be affected first, but it's actually really nice to actually go out there to the people who could also make a change, even if they're not affected by the issue. Yeah, obviously it's gonna be a little bit harder to make them care about it, but it's not impossible.
Love that. And that is a very inspiring note for us to end on, not only for today's panel, but for this entire series. So I would just like to thank all of our panelists today for sharing your great work with us. I mean, just wow, bravo to all of you for just the creativity and the truly, community-centered work that you're doing. And thanks to all of you who joined us today and throughout the week. This has been an incredible week of lectures, and I want to remind all of our viewers that you can see any of the talks you missed by visiting our YouTube channel. We have a whole playlist from this week, and of course, lots of other videos that are related to climate change too. And finally, as I noted early on in the program today, please don't forget that Metcalf Institute counts on donations to do our work. So if you've been inspired by these talks and want to support more of these important conversations, please do make a gift today. And you get that extra thrill of knowing that your gift will be doubled if you give by June 30th. Who doesn't love kind of like seeing money arise out of thin air? So just click on that link in the chat and you can know that you're advancing the conversations and news coverage that can spur people toward action on the climate crisis and other environmental issues. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.